Thank you again for joining us for today's webinar on Pay As You Throw, a proven strategy to recycle more and dispose less. This webinar is sponsored by the Carton Council and the Southeast Recycling Development Council. I am Jennifer Dabbs. I'm the Director of Outreach for CERTIC and will be facilitating the webinar today. Today's speakers are Will Sager, the Executive Director of the Southeast Recycling Development Council, Derek Brown, Vice President of Sustainability for the Carton Council and Director of Sustainability for Evergreen Packaging, Susan Bush, Senior Consultant with RSE USA, David Ingram, a Sustainability Project Manager for the City of Wilmington, North Carolina, and Lisa Ryder, Assistant Director of Onslow County, North Carolina Solid Waste Department. We do have a full hour planned for you. I hope to allow time at the end of the webinar to address any questions you may have. As a reminder, you are on mute during the entire presentation, but if you go to the GoToMeeting sidebar that should be present when you logged into this webinar, you should see an area for asking questions. Feel free to type those questions in there at any time during the webinar, and we will discuss at the end of the presentation. We will be recording this webinar today and have it posted to the Southeast Recycling Development Council's website page, which is serdc.org/PAYT by the 1st of next week. So I'd like to begin today's webinar with our first speaker, and that is Will Sager.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jen. I'd like to welcome you to CERTIC's first webinar of 2017. CERTIC was founded 10 years ago to help fill an overwhelming demand for recycling content material in the Southeast. We're an industry-backed organization with two major focus groups, elected official and recycling collection officials, and our mission is to connect them with industry to promote sustainable recycling. Jen, I can't advance that slide. Can you help me?
It is restarting PowerPoint. If you bear with me for just 1 second.
There we go. And it's quite a thunderstorm where I am, so if you've got some noise in the background, it's probably the rain beating on the windows right now. But CERTIC works across the Southeast. We've identified 360 manufacturing facilities employing 90,000 people in manufacturing jobs in the Southeast, and we seek to put material into the pipeline to feed those companies. Our sponsors are here on this board. We appreciate their support. Without their support, our work would not be possible. In addition to making presentations on economic impact, we have several resources on our website that are available to you. And with that, I would like to share with you the information how you can get a hold of me or Jen, and then I will introduce our next speaker. Derek Brown is with Evergreen Packaging in Waynesville, North Carolina. Derek's been with Evergreen for more years than he probably wants me to tell you, but he serves on the board of CERTIC, and he also serves on the board of the Carton Council. So I'll let Derek then share now. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Will. Just first wanted to tell you who the Carton Council is. We came together in 2009 in order to divert cartons from the landfill. Before that, there was the low recyclability, the low availability to access in the United States. Across the world, there was good access to carton recycling, but not that great in the United States. In terms of the members of the Carton Council, we have Tetra Pak, Evergreen Packaging, along with Elopak and Sig Combi Block. These are all the carton. These are aseptic and gable tops, so both the refrigerated cartons you see on the shelf in the store and aseptic cartons with soups and broths and those sorts of things. The reason we're interested and we supported this webinar today is we would like to see continued increased funding and capability of the recycling system to get more better materials into the recycling system. So we think that pay-as-you-throw is a good alternative and a good option for communities to consider in order to increase recycling in their community. So thank you for joining. Next, I'd like to introduce Susan Bush, Senior Consultant with Reclay Stewart Edge, USA. Susan.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for taking the time to attend today, and thanks CERTIC for partnering with us to present this webinar. and to the Carton Council, Derek, for your support in presenting this material. Hopefully this is all useful information to you all. And Jana, will this thing go away?
Yeah, we've put up a poll. Sorry about that. Yes, so right now our audience is being asked if they've ever visited the Carton Council's opportunities page before. We're gathering that, and then we should be able to get onto the actual webinar, Susan.
Okay, I'm going to keep talking, and I'm going to talk pretty quickly, but if you need me to slow down, let Jen know, and she'll tell me, just type in the chat box. But we've got a lot of material to go through. So first I'm going to talk a bit about pay-as-you-throw, and then I'm going to have two representatives from some North Carolina communities describe their pay-as-you-throw programs. So Jen,
you should have controls now.
Well, the slide's not up there. What's up there is that that item, sort of like that card.
There may be a delay.
Okay. So I'm just not seeing it. Pay-as-you-throw is basically pricing trash services.
I think the storm is playing havoc with us.
Sorry about that, people. Is pricing trash service based on the amount of municipal trash that is going to be disposed. So essentially, it incentivizes the reduction of waste being disposed. So, so in more than one way, it'll encourage people to generate less trash to begin with and to put what they can in the recycling cart. So there are lots of different names for pay-as-you-throw. One is Save Money, Reduce Trash, or SMART. Another is unit pricing. We also sometimes hear it called variable rate pricing, with and that usually applies to carts, trash metering, or pay-as-you-go. And I'm sure there are other names too, but there are over 7,000 pay-as-you-throw programs in the U.S. Pay-as-you-throw began in the 20s in California, so they say. I don't know if it's true or California just likes to say it's true for everything, but it's been a long-standing type of way to run a program. And there was a push to implement pay-as-you-throw early to mid-1990s. It just became a really kind of popular thing to do, and it was pushed by the EPA, both to incentivize waste reduction and recycling and to help communities pay for their recycling programs, many of which were just getting up and running in the 90s. Some states have been really strongly encouraging pay-as-you-throw, with some even mandating that local governments have some type of pay-as-you-throw in place, including Vermont with their mandatory, with their Act 148, it mandates that. And Minnesota's also requires all communities to have variable rate pricing of some sort. And then there are some other states like Washington and Oregon and Iowa and Wisconsin that will require pay-as-you-throw under certain circumstances. Pay-as-you-throw seems to be a pretty underutilized strategy in the Southeast. And so that's one of the reasons that we're really happy that CERC's partnering with us, because we think that there's a lot of opportunity in the Southeast to implement pay-as-you-throw. I was not able to find any newly implemented programs in the region since the 90s, but if your community is one of them, please do let me know. There are lots of organizations that have supported or provided information about pay-as-you-throw to help encourage communities to implement pay-as-you-throw, and this is just a sampling of them. Statewide, you'll notice Mass DEP and Connecticut DEEP, they both have some great resources on their websites. Some of them are not super new, but they're still very relevant, so I encourage you to look at those websites as well. The focus today is really on single-family residential pay-as-you-throw. Usually when we talk about pay-as-you-throw, that's really what we're talking about, although as you'll see, Wilmington has some commercial pay-as-you-throw in place. Multifamily dwellings can be challenging to implement pay-as-you-throw because there's just a little bit of disconnect between waste generation and payment. So it's not a direct accountability for each household within the multifamily dwelling. That can be challenging. I have seen some communities, particularly in Massachusetts, that have pay-as-you-throw using a bag system for multifamily dwellings. And then if the hauler identifies noncompliance, they contact the owner of the dwelling and say, look, you need to get this fixed. So it's up to the owner of the MFD to get that remedy. So here's a slide showing the an impact relative to other strategies of pay-as-you-throw. So as you see, it's a very proven technique to reduce the amount of waste disposed relative to other types of strategies. Pay-as-you-throw seems to be more effective when bags are used because there's just a smaller incremental decision point for the households to make. When they have to open up another bag, they're thinking about another $3 or whatever it is that they've got to pay versus a cart that most people are going to not worry about filling up. So there are lots of different options for pay-as-you-throw, as I'm sure you know, and here are some examples. You can have a bag type of program where residents pay a certain amount per bag. That can be curbside without carts. It could be curbside with carts. It could be curbside with other containers, or it could be a drop-off program, very flexible with the bags. There are also cart-based programs, as you can see, with multiple sized carts. Tags and stickers are an option, although they've become a little less commonplace with the advent of home printers. There's a little bit of a fraud issue that can occur. And then a lot of communities implement a combination of these strategies. So, for example, in that Fort Worth picture on the bottom right, they have carts with pay-as-you-throw bags for out-of-cart set-outs. And there are a myriad of ways of pricing options too. When communities think about implementing pay-as-you-throw, they often wonder, well, how do we charge residents if under a pay-as-you-throw program? These are the three broad categories of pricing options. One is called proportional, basically a set rate per bag, let's say $3 per every bag disposed. And all of the solid waste management costs would come out of those fees. Another option is variable rate, where there are different prices for different size carts. And then there's a two-tiered or multi-tiered, which is a really common approach for lots of reasons, and one that we really recommend. And this is one in which there's a base level of service for which residents are charged either on a utility bill, it might be a tax bill or a tax assessment, but there's a base level that includes recycling and perhaps some other base services such as a certain amount of trash, or it might be yard trimmings collection or yard trimmings and food scrap collection or something like that. And then another tier that is often added is a bag or a tag option for additional set-outs and or bulky waste. So I've seen communities say, well, if you have bulk waste, you need to tie 2 bags to it or something like that so that the level of service is commensurate with the cost of the service. Now, some of the strengths of pay-as-you-throw, number one, it's a flexible program, very flexible. So whether you're an urban community or rural or automated collection or manual collection, or drop-off, there are ways to implement pay-as-you-throw in your community. Pay-as-you-throw is seen as equitable by most people. They think of it pretty much like you would any other utility, like electricity or water, where you are charged based upon the amount of service used. Surveys show that over 90% of households are satisfied with the program once it's been implemented, and it can be implemented with relatively low costs. Likewise, it can be implemented relatively quickly compared with some of the other types of programs, though I wouldn't rush it. I wouldn't cut out certain steps like planning and community involvement. So when implementing pay-as-you-throw, some of the strengths to talk about are, the main strength is the proven ability to reduce the amount of waste disposed and increase recycling and source reduction. Most communities that have implemented pay-as-you-throw dispose of 49% less trash on average than communities that do not have pay-as-you-throw implemented. So that's a pretty significant difference. Individual communities that implement pay-as-you-throw have shown that they've reduced their disposal tonnage from 16 to 56%. And pay-as-you-throw communities recycle 20 to 40% more on average, that's by tons. And communities, individual communities that have implemented pay-as-you-throw have increased their recycling tons by 6 to 35%. So it's really pretty common, actually, when I was reviewing the data, for communities to increase their recycling rates by 50% or more. So it can have a real significant impact on recycling rates. So communities often have concerns when they're thinking about pay-as-you-throw. One is increased contamination. If somebody doesn't want to pay for it, maybe they'll put it in the recycling cart instead. And of course, a strategy to address that is enforcement, and I mean education along with this enforcement. Enforcement is really key, and I'm just sort of share something. The Recycling Partnership and several communities in Massachusetts have recently done a little study showing that how enforcement really is beneficial. And when they gave little oops tags to households, it proved to be a very effective strategy. We went back and revisited, and it's a very effective strategy. And they take this educational approach more so than a penalty type of approach. Illegal dumping is another concern, and most studies show that illegal dumping is really more of a fear than an actual outcome. And the strategy to address that is also education and enforcement, but also hybrid pricing and having a base level of service so that residents at least have some service and are not putting trash in the woods simply because they can't afford service or don't want to pay for a basic level of service. Another concern is uncertain level of revenues. Communities might say, well, we just don't know how many bags are going to be sold. And you know, it is hard to predict exactly how people's behaviors are going to change when the system is changed. So one strategy, again, is to have a base level of fees so that your community is certain to at least receive that amount of money, and then to have the ability to adjust those whatever additional fees are charged. So a per bag fee, to be able to adjust that annually, for example. And then, of course, there's just resistance to change. I mean, that's just human nature. Most people don't like change. So it's important to highlight the benefits. And to already have the external fees in place can help. I know of several communities that before they went to pay-as-you-throw, they had been in a tax-based system, and they started charging an external fee so that residents could get used to the fact that this is a service that costs money and that they had an external fee to pay. And then when pay-as-you-throw was introduced, they were much more amenable to it because they felt like they had some level of control over the size of the fees that they would be charged. Another concern is impacts to economically disadvantaged households. And so communities have addressed that by having discounts for challenged households, or waivers, or providing them with some free bags, for example. So there are ways to alleviate that concern as well. I'm just going to talk now about some of the best management practices for implementing pay-as-you-throw. Oh, sorry, one more. Cost and collection time is a concern, and that typically is offset by increased revenues from recovered materials or decreased disposal costs. Now, some of the best management practices in implementing pay-as-you-throw programs. First, I'm going to talk about planning. And again, it's important to have a well-established recycling program in place and good education and outreach before pay-as-you-throw is tackled. And again, to have an external fee if it doesn't already exist, so that residents understand that this is a service that needs to be paid for. Beyond that, we recommend having, including recycling and possibly organics collection, depending on your community's needs, in the base fee if you have a hybrid pricing scheme, and to develop an internal advisory group when planning your pay-as-you-throw program. And so that should include a lot of key decision makers, some members of the public, maybe environmental concerns, and definitely private haulers if your community is serviced by private haulers. And so that advisory group would be tasked with researching other programs, hopefully in communities that are much like your own, and developing briefing documents and an implementation plan and so on if this is not handled by staff directly. And then they would present the options and solicit public input. Setting public input is really important, and the public really appreciates being part of the process and feeling heard, and often they do bring some great ideas to the whole process. Again, it's important to anticipate any concerns and identify potential solutions, and to sell the program to the key decision makers, and conduct lots of public outreach. And I keep hearing that the most effective public outreach is, of course, the most time-consuming and resource-intensive, which is the face-to-face meetings, community meetings, and so on, neighborhood meetings. People really appreciate that kind of setting and the ability to ask questions face-to-face. So when highlighting the benefits of the program, this is not, okay. Some of these benefits, again, are equity, similar to other utilities. And when people start to think about that, they realize it's just really not that equitable for a retired couple, for example, that doesn't generate much trash to pay the same amount as a family of 6, for example. It also helps people understand that services cost money, helps, like I mentioned, increase recycling and source reduction, increase revenues for sale of commodities, and decrease disposal costs. It also can better protect revenues, particularly as compared to communities that have a solely tax-based system. Local communities often find that they either cannot increase those fees like they would like to, or increase those revenues because they're really competing with the community's other needs. So having an external fee really helps protect those revenues and run their department more like a business. Pay-as-you-throw helps extend landfill life. So even in regions like the Southeast where disposal may not be costly, it can be challenging to site a new landfill. So extending the life of a landfill can be really important. And supplying feedstock to local and regional manufacturers, especially in a region like the Southeast, where you all are fortunate to have lots of great manufacturing, auto industry and affiliated industries. They often rely on recovered feedstock. And they are having to import this material from all over the country. And it seems a little bit silly. And to the extent that those materials can come from within the region, those revenues remain local. And jobs. There have been statistics that show how recycling creates way more jobs than disposal does. The TELUS Institute tells me that disposing of 1,000 tons of MSW, for example, creates 0.1 jobs, whereas processing that same amount of recyclable material would create 2 full jobs. So, and then there's an additional 4 to 10 jobs on the manufacturing side, depending on the material type recovered. So recycling isn't just about feeling good and doing the right thing for the planet. It also really is beneficial to the economy. So some more best management practices when your community implements a pay-as-you-throw program would be, if you're particularly in a larger community, you might begin with a pilot program just to work out all the bugs. You'd want to have a strong publicized enforcement and education program in place, and also to be consistent with that. Communities that are inconsistent with their enforcement find that it's not very effective. Definitely expect higher disposal volumes right before implementation, and when the pay-as-you-throw program is announced. That's when people want to clean out their attics and their basements and their garages. So there will be more waste generated. And to plan for continuous monitoring, enforcement, and re-education. It's not a one-and-done kind of thing. It's something that needs to continuously happen. And if you're a community that has some transient populations like tourists or seasonal populations or students, then that's even more important. And if it's at all possible to keep your program stable for at least 1 year while everybody gets sort of used to it, then that's really the ideal. So anyway, those are some general BMPs for any type of pay-as-you-throw, and some that are specific to cart-based systems are on this slide. So Lisa Skumatz and her group, CIRA, have identified that the most beneficial cost differential for different size carts is 1.5 to 1.8 for 100% increase in volume. And just as an easy math example, that would be if you had a 32-gallon cart for $10 a month, for example, the ideal price for a 64 gallon cart or 100% more capacity would be $15 to $18 a month, for example. Also to have a policy in place for out-of-cart setouts and to make that well known and to be consistent about it. So some communities don't want any out-of-cart setouts because they don't want their crews ever leaving the trucks, or the private hauler does not want their crews ever leaving the trucks. Some will have pay-as-you-throw bags for out-of-cart setouts, and they may run a separate vehicle to come by and get that. So just to let people know what needs to be done for those out-of-cart setouts. Also to have a policy and plan in place for your cart size option. Some communities have 2 carts, some have 3 different carts, some have 5. And so how is that going to happen? Often a community will send out a postcard saying, here's your default unless you send this postcard in, or tell us on this website link. And you may only change it out once per year, for example. Or if you want to change it out sooner than that, it's going to be a $5 fee, and so on. So to really think that through so that that's considered and done in a way that works for your community. Most say it's a good idea to offer a mini cart, especially if you have an organics program in place, particularly one that takes food residuals. And most communities think it's a good idea to have an RFID or barcode system in place for carts, especially if you have a bag program inside of carts, which is possible to do. So for bag systems, some best practices include making sure that bag outlets are really convenient for residents. It's got to be convenient for them to find their bags and to purchase them. And maybe consider different size bags. Some communities have 2 or 3 different sized bags for different types of generators. So that's that's more convenient for a lot of people to have a small bag, particularly if they have one of those kitchen drawers. And to keep an emergency supply of bags in a municipal office, locked up somewhere, just in case. Important to monitor the use of bags closely, especially early on, so that you can really see, are we ordering the right number of bags here? And to work closely with vendors, especially in the beginning, because it's a new process for those that sell the bags too. Oftentimes, communities will have bags sold at grocery stores, for example, because that's very convenient for residents. And to consider on-vehicle cameras in the showing the hopper if you have automated collection with pay-as-you-throw bags. There are several communities in Massachusetts that do this, mostly using private haulers, and that's what that picture to the right is. That's exactly what that camera is showing, what's being tipped into the hopper. And that way, if a household disposes of a bag that's not a special bag, a prepaid bag, the hauler can make note of that, especially with these systems, very automatically, and then they submit that list to the town, and the town can do what they would like with that. So anyway, I know that was really kind of quick, but I do want to let these 2 communities from North Carolina on their experiences with pay-as-you-throw, so they can say service to me. That would be great. And this is my contact information here. If anybody has any questions later, I'm happy to answer them. But next, I'm going to introduce you to David Ingram. David is a sustainability project manager with the city of Wilmington, and he has lots of experience in sustainability beyond solid waste in his lead credential. And so thank you, David, for joining us today and talking about the city of Wilmington's story.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, happy to be here and tell you a little bit about our program here in Wilmington. We're a medium-sized city over here on the east coast of North Carolina. We're kind of on a peninsula with the Cape Fear River on one side and the Atlantic Ocean on the other. We're population currently a little over 100,000, and we're very much a growing community with some significant growth expected by the year 2040. We currently serve about 30,000 households with our solid waste program, which includes municipal trash, recycling, yard waste, and bulky collection. We also have an e-waste collection as a part of that, just to kind of give you an overview of the services we provide. Our solid waste division is funded by enterprise funds which is the revenues generated based on our solid waste fees, which is, plays right into the pay-as-you-throw program. Our plan was implemented back in 1992, so it's been around for quite a while. Prior to implementing the plan, they did reach out with a lot of focus groups. We even consulted with the EPA and looked at various programs located across the country to make sure that we had a good representation and feeling like we explored all possibilities before implementing the program here in Wilmington. And the driving force really was driven by the citizens. At the time, just prior to implementing, we probably had some of the highest tippage fees in the state, I believe, somewhere around $60 a ton. So the citizens weren't very happy with the continued rise in the price of solid waste disposal. So they really were kind of on board from the beginning with trying to help figure out a new program and develop one that was going to be equitable and for everyone across the city. And it was really met with a great deal of acceptance once they decided on the program to implement here. We do have a pretty diverse community as far as a very dense kind of central business district, as well as our neighborhoods in more residential areas. So we really had to kind of devise two separate programs to meet the needs of those two distinct kind of areas. Our residential curbside pay-as-you-throw program consists of a weekly curbside trash and yard waste. And again, we got the choice of various size bins. Our 95-gallon bin priced at one level, and our smaller 35-gallon bin priced slightly lower. As well as we supply stickers for any overflow capability. We just ask that people put those in bags of their choosing, plastic bags, and use the stickers to tag them. And they get a supply of stickers. I think it's a minimum of 12, which costs like $1.25 each. And just of note is that current rate of service, which we really has been stable, and we haven't had to raise that rate for about 5 years now. So just shows that our citizens are happy with the service and acceptable level of price for what the service they're getting. Our recycling is at no additional charge to that base rate noted from the trash service. And again, it's the same choice of different size bins, whether it's a 95 or a 35-gallon cart. And as I mentioned, we also have the bulky item pickup upon request. The bulky items can be anything from furniture to any large items that aren't typically going into either of the trash or recycling bins, as well as the kind of e-waste service falls under that. Our central business district program is what we use in our downtown historic area, which consists of pretty tight spaces. We have a lot of narrow alleyways and a lot of restaurants and shops located in the downtown area. And the issue down there is we really don't have a whole lot of space for users down there to store any trash curbside, so we really have to enforce a very strict time schedule as to when people and commercial businesses place their either trash or recycled items down at the curbside. But they are able to choose the level of service based on your needs, which varies from 2 times a week, say for some of the smaller shops down in the area, which may not generate a whole lot of trash, to 2 times, 7 days a week for some of our larger restaurants that really are generating quite heavy volumes. The service down there consists of the 40-gallon pay-as-you-go bags. As you see, we charge about $1.50 per bag, and the disposal and tippage fee is included in the cost of those bags. And just to give you a little idea of kind of the volume of service, it's about 20,000 bags that we typically sell annually. And the cost to the city for those bags is about 25 to 30 cents. We do bid that out on an annual basis. We typically require 3 bids for an RFP for those. And in general, we go with the lowest bidder. So that's kind of how we generate which types and provider of the bags that we use. As far as, again, on the more residential side, we do have a growing number of residents downtown. There's, a few existing apartments, condominiums, and some of our historic homes. So we have a different rate for the residential folks in the downtown area. Their base rate is $22 a month. And for that $22 a month, they get 20-gallon pay-as-you-throw bags, and they get a voucher for about 10 bags a month, which at this point has not been a problem, as people generally don't go over that 10 bags a month. They seem to regulate that pretty well. And that service is collected 7 days a week. Our monitoring and code enforcement is handled by 1 full-time employee, as well as from the observations of our solid waste crews as they're out running their routes. A big emphasis here is on education. We try not to be too heavy-handed. It's certainly an ongoing effort. As you can see kind of from the picture on the right there, that's really what the recycling and trash crews do not want to see when they come around a corner. Those are the kind of issues we try and avoid, and for the most part, our residents are pretty good, but we do have some ongoing enforcement and education with all of our residents. And of course, citations are issued for any repeat violations, and that's handled on a case-by-case basis. Some of the issues that we've encountered since implementing the program are the cart switching. Basically, folks underestimate the volume of trash and or recycling that they're going to generate, and it causes just a lot of administrative effort, as well as personnel time to get carts switched out. We do handle that by basically giving 2 free switch outs each year. After that, I think it's a $10 fee for any additional switch outs. So we really try and keep people from flip-flopping back and forth and making that smart choice right from the start. And we do try and push the larger bins initially, just because in the long run it seems to be the cheaper option, as opposed to having to buy a bunch of stickers to handle any overflows that the residents may have. The pay, in regard to the stickers, they're often not understood, particularly by some of our college students, short-term renters, and tourists that we have in the area. We are quite a tourist community, and we do have the University of North Carolina, Wilmington located here in the city, as well as a community college. So we have a pretty diverse audience, and many times not that aware of all of the programs and practices that we're trying to implement as part of our solid waste programs. And again, in the central business district, we often run into people trying to overstuff the 50-pound weight limit, and that just leads to contamination and trash issues in our alleyways, and of course can lead to pest control problems. So we really try and keep a tight rein on that. We do have crews who are down there pretty much 24/7, so they're really good about trying to educate as well as reach out to anybody who may be having a problem and understanding the best way to handle it. Anyway, those are my slides. Please, there's my contact information. I would welcome any questions again at the end, or if anybody wants to reach out to learn further about our program here in Wilmington.
Thank you, David. So our final speaker for the webinar this afternoon is Lisa Ryder. She is with Onslow County, North Carolina's Solid Waste Division, and she's going to speak a little bit about how Onslow County manages their program.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for having me. So Onslow County Solid Waste, of course, this is a county, so it's a little bit different from a municipality in terms of how we do our collection services. Just to kind of give you an idea of what the solid waste department in Onslow County looks like, we have a landfill. Our landfill, we charge $49 a ton. We have an enterprise fund attached to that landfill, which is where most of the funding comes from to pay for the sites that I'll be talking about, and you'll see where I'm coming from once I advance to some of these slides. But we also have, a land clearing and inert debris landfill for our yard waste, which we do collect at these sites that I'll talk about. We have a landfill gas to energy plant, and we have a Sunoco contracted MRF on site at our solid waste department. But we have a pay-as-you-throw program at our convenience center sites. And so our convenience center sites, we have 10. I'll talk more about the locations of those, but we like to call it, the more you recycle, the less you pay, is what we kind of go into with our program. So the idea here is to pay to dispose of the trash, and of course at our landfill it's based on weight. But at the sites, we're not going to have scales at these sites, so it's based on volume. So we're currently charging, and we have been charging for a very long time, $1.50 per 30-gallon bag. So this could be a bring your own bag, or it could be a bag that you buy at the site. So we have bags that say, Onslow County Solid Waste. They're colored blue. They're not bags that you can buy in the grocery store, but you can purchase them at the site, and these sites are manned. They're staffed, so you can, purchase them there. So you could pay the $1.50 for the blue county bag, or you can BYOB and use your own bag. Either way, you're paying $1.50. Large items, so we do use this site for bulky items as well, and those items are $3 a piece. So no matter if you bring a chair or a sofa or a mattress, it's $3 per item. Recycling, of course, the idea behind pay-as-you-throw is that recycling is either no cost or a lower cost, so that people are encouraged to reduce their waste and recycle more. And at our sites, we are able to recycle pretty much the same thing anybody else is going to be recycling on the Southeast. And we did add cartons several years ago, as well as Tetra Paks and other materials. You can now, we recycle aluminum cans, of course, pans, foil, steel cans, scrap metal, glass. At some of our sites, we actually separate glass into different containers. So we have some sites that ABC Permanent Businesses bars are using those sites very frequently to bring their glass. In North Carolina, there's an ABC rule, or rather there's a recycling rule for ABC permitted businesses. So they are required to have a recycling program in order to keep their alcoholic beverage license. And so when that happened, a lot of these local bars were kind of frantic trying to find a place to bring their glass. And so some of them do use our site. And the sites that these places use more frequently, we do separate our glass just to kind of keep our other commingled material clean and keep the glass separate. And there's, you know, kind of an effort going around now to do that anyway. It allows for the glass to be more marketable and for the other materials as well to be a bit more marketable. So we do separate that in some cases. And of course, plastic bottles, tubs, paper. We do offer electronics recycling at our site, and we do that by having utility trailers that we fill. We charge $3 a piece for monitors and television, and we don't charge for microwaves anymore, but that's still on some of our old printed material, but we do charge the $3 for that. And we actually used to charge $15 for televisions and monitors, which probably was a little bit more appropriate for now than then, but you know, that's kind of where we'll get into, you know, kind of starting with appropriate fees, because it really is, like Susan mentioned, people don't like change. So if you start out with $1.50, sometimes it's very hard to get to where you need to be. And right now we're really kind of looking to where, in order to break even or make a little bit money to improve our sites, we're looking at probably more like $3 per 30-gallon bag. So here are our convenience center sites. They're spread out all throughout the county. I'll mention again what Susan mentioned, and that is that most people don't like change. These are a lot of convenience center sites for a county, and some of them are pretty close to one another. And as we are doing our cost-benefit analysis now, we're finding that some of these sites really aren't used that much, but it's nearly impossible politically to get rid of them at this point. So here are our convenience center sites. This is our patron count, and you'll see what I'm saying here. So if you look at, and I will mention that the first ones that you see are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday sites. So they're open Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday from 8 until 6. And the other sites that you see are only open 1 day a week. So I mentioned they were staff, and so the 5-day-a-week sites are actually they have a full-time staff person that stays at that site, and then the 1 day a week site we have one staff person that goes to those individual sites, and they they drive a van. And at some of the sites, there is not a building. They work out of that van. So these are all things to consider, because if you're talking about convenience center sites, you need, not just the infrastructure in terms of your open top containers, or if you're going to use compactors, but you're also going to have to consider having a building out there so that they have restroom facilities and things like that. So here again, these are our 10 sites, and this is a graph showing you tonnage of material. So the blue is recyclable material that we're collecting, and the green is trash. And it's unfortunate that we don't see more recycling at these sites, and we do a lot of education and outreach. And the only thing I can think of, because I sit at these sites and kind of see what's flowing in, and people are really, really doing their part to recycle if this is their primary source of disposal. So if they're not contracting with a service provider to pick up curbside, and they're using these sites as their only collection method, then they are really, really doing their part to reduce waste and recycle. A lot of these sites are being used by folks that contract with a waste hauler to collect curbside, but they're using these sites for their bulky items. to be thrown away. Also, we have municipalities like, for instance, North Topsail Beach. Their residents will bring their bulky items to the site, and we have a contract with North Topsail Beach that they kind of cover that fee for them, but they do use our site. At these sites, we also collect white goods, so your appliances and all of that kind of goes into an open top container, and that is recycled. That's something that's actually not captured in the blue that you see here. So the blue that you're seeing here is your basic commingled material, including bottles, cans, cartons, Tetra Paks, you know, your regular commingled material, and cardboard. We also separate cardboard at these sites, mainly for, you know, just kind of getting that compaction rate better. As you'll see here, this is our 2016 revenues versus expenses. They are not a money generator. So unless you have an enterprise fund, unless you have a method of making money in order to sustain something like this, you're really going to have to start out with a pretty hefty fee. And so initially, the idea behind these pay-as-you-throw convenience center sites was that we're offering a service to our citizens. We're not out really even break even, but since we have a landfill and we have an enterprise fund, we're going to kind of, you know, have this as a part of our general operating expenses, are these convenience center sites, and just kind of tie that in with our landfill operations. But it's like I said before, if you start out with a fee that's appropriate and you do your cost benefit analysis and you see how much it's actually going to cost to and you have to determine whether or not you own the land or if you're leasing the land, or you know, how much are your startup costs and how much is the depreciation and so forth. And so that's what you're really going to need to determine what your fee is going to be per bag. Or you could even charge for, we're looking at now thinking about charging per pickup truckload, because we have a lot of folks that don't even bag their material. They come in with a truckload full of stuff that's, you know, it's tarp, but our site monitors are now having to look at the back of their truck and go, okay, so how would this material fit into a 30-gallon bag? How many 30-gallon bags would it take to fill up what materials is in the back of this truck? And so that's difficult to do. So we are looking at a flat fee for trucks and trailers and things like that. I mentioned that there are a lot of sites in Onslow County, and as you notice here, they're really close together, and that's unfortunate too. So if you look at Hubert, the Hubert site, which is a one-day-a-week site, which is a very low producer, it's only 4.7 miles from the Midway Park site, which is a 5-day-a-week site. So we have been trying for years to do away with that site, but unfortunately, it's very political to get rid of a convenience center site. Folks are, again, like Susan mentioned, most people don't like change. So these are things to consider. So if it were me and I started this program the many years ago that it's been in place, I would start out small. If you're going to be doing convenience center sites, start out small and with a strong fee schedule. So start out with a small number of sites with a very strong fee schedule. So my thoughts, some of these things I did mention, but some of them I have not, so I will go through this. Things to consider are whether or not you want to have compactors on site. So the things to consider here is that you're going to have, you know, a massive amount of electricity. And what is that going to cost you initially, the startup cost versus ongoing cost, and how will that benefit you? If you have sites that are very close to where you're hauling it to, they may not be, you know, it may not be necessary to have a compactor there. But we have sites that are you know, about 30 minutes away from the landfill. So those sites, you may want to have a compactor for both trash and recycling. How many sites are you going to start with? Like I said, I would start out small with a strong fee schedule. Whether or not you have it manned or unmanned, I cannot imagine any of these sites being unmanned. but it depends on your budget, right? Okay, so illegal dumping, Susan mentioned this, and I've compared our community to other communities that have a flat fee across the board. You pay this much a year and you can throw away whatever you want to. And I'm constantly approached by folks who are moving into our community. They're like, why can't I just pay a one-time fee and throw away whatever I want to? And interestingly enough, it's usually the folks that are recycling more that are asking me that. And I say, well, what's the incentive for the person who doesn't recycle more? If you can throw away, it's a free-for-all. You can throw away whatever you want to with, you know, very little economic consequences. And they're like, oh, you know, I didn't think about it that way. And that's what's so brilliant about a pay-as-you-throw program, because it takes the environmental aspect out of the equation, and it really focuses on the economic impact of waste reduction and recycling. But what I found with illegal dumping is that comparing our community that has had pay-as-you-throw for a very long time to communities that have you pay the one-time fee, you can throw away as much as you want, is that it's really not much different. And folks that really want to illegally dump something, it's usually, it's more about the convenience of the location than it is about actually paying. We have seen folks they have even illegally dumped a bag that they already paid for the disposal. So they bought the $1.50 bag, and now we found it in the woods illegally dumped. We're not talking about folks that are into rocket science here. So if someone's going to illegally dump, they're probably going to do it regardless of if there's a pay-as-you-throw program or not. Education and outreach, it's such a unique opportunity for manned convenience center sites and pay-as-you-throw, because you have that incentive, you have that economic incentive to talk to folks about waste reduction and recycling. And it's also a really great location to survey customers, you know, talk about consumer habits and what they're buying and what's recyclable versus what's not recyclable. And as you know, that's evolving all of the time. So it's a really unique opportunity to kind of get feedback about what's going on in the waste world from these customers that are using your sites all the time. Finding startup costs. So if this is your first go around and you're trying to come up with the startup costs to develop convenience center sites, I highly recommend doing some grant searches. So a lot of grants won't pay for things like property, but they will pay for things like startup costs. So open top, 40-yard containers for trash collection, or closed top recycle containers, compactors for recycling. There's a lot of different grant programs that'll cover your startup costs, as long as you can show that you can sustain that program. The startup costs are an easy grant. And I'll give you just a couple of ones that come off the top of my mind. So in North Carolina, I know a lot of you aren't in North Carolina, but you may have another state program like this. But in North Carolina, we have the Community Waste Reduction Grants, and those will cover infrastructure costs related to reducing waste at convenience center sites. And another one that comes to mind, especially in rural areas, is the USDA Rural Development, Rural Utility Service Division. They have a grant for solid waste management, and they really adore these type of programs that are in rural communities and solving a solid waste infrastructure problem that also kind of increases recycling and reduces waste. And how do you charge? So a flat fee, for a truck bed, or per bag, or per bulky item, and then other items to consider will be electronics, whether or not you want to collect those, how much you're going to charge for that, are all things to consider. And like I said, start off strong if you can, because it's so hard to increase your fees moving forward, especially if it's going to be a dramatic fee increase. And this is my contact information if anybody has any additional questions later on.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. That was fantastic. Before we get to Q&A, I just wanted to point out these resources. The cartonopportunities.org site has some supporting policy tools on the topics that you see there, as well as a 2-page pay-as-you-throw informational sheet. And then the payasyoutthrow.org website is a website all about pay-as-you-throw, and it has lots of case studies, data results, Q&A, additional resources, links to articles and that kind of thing. And there is, under the Q&A section, there is a video clip showing the in-vehicle camera monitoring the hopper, which I think I found interesting. I thought it was fascinating. So I just wanted to point out those 2 resources. And I know we've kind of gone on for a bit, but I think Dave and Lisa had some good insight. So if there are any questions, then we'll take them now.
Yes, while I'm going through the ones that have been submitted, I'm going to do one more poll. Since you've attended today's session, we would like to know if your intents for using this information gained in your own maybe pay-as-you-throw programs or investigations of doing so. So I'll leave this open for a few minutes, and then we'll move in here to the questions that were asked during the webinar. And let me go get the first one up here and see if we can work through these. All right. The first question I have is for Wilmington, North Carolina. Is the bulky e-waste service included in the pay-as-you-throw program, or is it charged for on a per basis unit?
It's included. It's it's part of the regular trash service, and yes, there's no additional fee for the bulky service or the e-waste. It's just on a per appointment schedule though, so it's not like we have crews out there just going around town looking for bulky items. It's very much on an appointment-based basis.
Okay, thank you, David. This one looks to be another question directed towards your program. You had said initially that residents can choose a smaller cart, but you only save $5 a month to accept 1/3 of the allowed volume. Are you considering having more incentivized price structures where additional trash doesn't actually cost more?
At this point, I think the price structure has been working quite well, and the residents seem to be quite happy with the structure. I mean, we did see a pretty good diversion rate increase once we implemented the program. Another one of the issues we're running into here in town is, particularly as we're growing, we're kind of continuing to annex additional areas. While that creates kind of some infrastructure program problems, it does continue to kind of increase our enterprise-based funds. So at this point, I think we're pretty happy with our price structure.
Okay. Lisa, this looks like a question for you. Does your county charge an annual solid waste user fee for your residents?
No, we don't.
Okay, let me keep moving through here. How does one assess needs for waivers of low-income folks in a pay-as-you-throw program? Which department or division of the city usually does this? This would be open, I guess, to anyone that may have input on that.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
I believe earlier on with Susan or perhaps David, it was mentioned that low-income folks there may be programs instituted that they can get waivers for pay-as-you-throw programs. That this person's asking what department or division of the city usually handles, qualifying those folks and kind of working with the solid waste departments to make that happen.
Well, I've seen it where if residents are part of another program to receive assistance, then they just show that to the solid waste division and they receive their waiver or their vouchers or their free bags or whatever. So, and that could be linked to a lot of different types of programs. So That's how I've seen it.
Jen, this is Will. I had experience with that in the program I put in 1995. It was a sticker-based program, and we just allotted a certain amount of stickers to the local charity house that helped people with utility bills and furniture vouchers. We made sure that they had solid waste stickers as well, and if they met the eligibility requirements there, they dispersed them. So we handed that off to another agency.
Jen, this is Lisa, and we have environmental enforcement staff that are within our zoning division of the planning department, and they enforce the solid waste ordinance, including things like illegal dumps, messy neighbors, hoarders, that kind of thing. And they do have a certain number of bags that they are given each month to, if there is a need, give to folks that they have open cases with or potential cases with in terms of not being able to pay for disposal needs, that they're, if their yard's kind of piling up with stuff, and that's kind of up to them whether or not they provide them with these bags. And we are working with them to develop a program to address some really messy neighborhoods, and have it as a grant program where that neighborhood community can apply for assistance. But it's not anything that could be remotely referred to as a free disposal day. It's more of assistance, and only assistance provided through an RFP type of situation.
Okay, great. Thank you. I believe this one would probably be more directed towards Susan, since you've done a lot of work with communities in large. How does a municipality make the shift from trash and recycling services included as part of a property tax to a pay-as-you-throw system? And asking in particular, like, where would they reference case studies and things of that nature?
Well, that's a good question, and I'll have to dig up names of communities that have done that specifically, but communities, often particularly if they're facing a tax increase, that's probably a good time to do it because the residents know they're going to be, potentially paying more in taxes anyway, and so some communities will take that time frame to implement a user fee for solid waste services. And like I said, initially it might not be a pay-as-you-throw program. Initially it might be we're just going to start an external fee program, but a community could also sort of keep their tax level funding, just keep it flat leveled, and implement a program where they charge residents, start charging residents for out-of-bag set-outs, for example. So that's one way to start to transition, is to just sort of flatline the budget from a tax base, and increases in costs, which happen periodically, obviously, are dealt with through additional bag charges for out-of-cart set-outs or bulk waste or something of that nature. I've also seen communities take the opportunity to implement organics collection or organics with food scraps collection at the same time, so that at least residents are feeling like they're getting some kind of additional service for the fee that's being charged. But if somebody wants to email me that, I'm sure I have some examples of communities, but I don't trust my memory to speed them off without double checking.
Okay, great. Thank you. And our final question is based on the bag type pay-as-you-throw system. So we've been getting a lot of educational and outreach efforts lately saying that MRFs are not well handled to suit bag programs because of the dangers that they present to the machinery and such. So isn't offering a pay-as-you-throw program using the bag system, is that helping recycling or is it hindering recycling if those sources are going to a MRF for sorting?
We don't use that for our commingled material. That's just for trash collection.
Yeah. I mean, that's typical, is the bags are for the trash only, and so they're just a way to sort of put a limit per certain dollar amount on trash, for each incremental unit of trash. So the pay-as-you-throw bag is just for the trash. That's true. The MRFs do not want to see plastic bags coming in. That's true.
Yes, great clarification. Thank you. All right, well, for those of you that were able to hang on with us here to the end to answer questions, we do appreciate you doing so. As mentioned, this is recorded and we will be getting this up on our website so that if anyone you know that had to drop early can access the question and answer session as well. I'd like to thank all the speakers again for preparing for this webinar and for sharing such great information with us. And please check out the payasyoutthrow.org website, as well as CERDIC's website and the Carton Council, and look forward to offering future webinars and trainings in the near future.
Thank you, Jen.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.